Nothing beats playoff football. For teams that have the right to extend their season, every game is a sliding door moment, with careers and legacies hanging in the balance. For the 2023 edition of the Dallas Cowboys, it took just 2 quarters to seal their fate. Their humbling loss to the youngest roster in the NFL looked like the end of an era in Dallas, applying serious noise and question marks to the careers of many in the organization. It was the 3rd straight agonizing playoff loss and yet another no-show from their quarterback, Dak Prescott. To the surprise of many, Mike McCarthy has been given one more shot at success, keeping the band together for an all-in effort. It's now or never in this make-or-break season for the Dallas Cowboys. On January 14th, 2024, the Dallas Cowboys suffered one of the most disastrous losses in franchise history. In the wild card round against the Green Bay Packers, the Cowboys were absolutely annihilated and blown off their home field by halftime, going in 27-0 down despite being 7-point favorites against the youngest team in the NFL. A few garbage time touchdowns made the score slightly more respectable, 48-32, but this was still an embarrassing loss for Cowboys fans everywhere, as they watched their team fall short in the playoffs for the 3rd straight seasons, following back-to-back losses for the 49ers in the previous 2 years. This has ultimately been the story of Mike McCarthy era in Dallas, a team capable of putting up great regular season numbers and beating up on the league's worst teams, but consistently unable to win the big game. After this loss, many Cowboys fans, including famous talking head Skip Bayless, called for McCarthy to be fired, hoping for new head coach and fresh start in Dallas. But Jerry Jones opted to stick with McCarthy, a man who did win the Super Bowl in his time as Packers head coach for at least 1 year, and the hope that he and Dak Prescott would finally be able to bring a Super Bowl back to the Lone Star State for the first time in almost 3 decades. McCarthy divides opinion as an NFL head coach. After all, he has led the Cowboys to 3 consecutive 12-win seasons and cemented their place among the best teams in football. But fundamentally, most Cowboys fans and fans of other teams remain totally unconvinced that he is the man to take them over the hump and to host the Lombardi Trophy. Crucially, McCarthy is out of contract at the end of the 2024 season, meaning that this really does feel like the last chance saloon for him. Unsurprisingly, with the way last season finished, the Cowboys opted not to offer him an extension beyond that, and in the eyes of many Dallas fans, he's already on a short leash going into this campaign. And if this really is the last throw of the dice in Dallas, really doesn't look like it during free agency, as Jerry Jones promised the franchise would go all in 2024 after falling short 3 years in a row. But the Cowboys faithful can be forgiven for being extremely frustrated by how this team has tackled the offseason. For a start, Dallas suffered several major departures, with arguably the biggest loss of those being the loss of star running back Tony Pollard to the Tennessee Titans. He had over 1,300 yards from scrimmage in 2023, behind only CeeDee Lamb, as he was a key part of the Cowboys' offense both on the ground and through the air. But ultimately, the Cowboys were outbid for his services by the Titans, who offered him a 3-year deal worth nearly $22 million as they looked to replace their own franchise tailback in Derrick Henry. They probably would have been forgiven by Cowboys fans if they'd pursued someone like Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley, who he ended up moving on to the division rival Philadelphia Eagles, but instead, Pollard's replacement looks to be ex-Cowboy Ezekiel Elliott. Once upon a time, Elliott was an all-pro back and was a true fan favorite amongst Dallas fans, having 4 separate 1,000-yard seasons and scoring 80 total touchdowns during his 7 seasons in Dallas. But he spent last season in New England, averaging just 3.5 yards a game and failing to make much of an impact at all on one of the league's very worst teams. It is unclear whether Elliott is an NFL-caliber starter in 2024, but as it stands, he is the number 1 back on the Cowboys depth chart, which can't exactly be filling Cowboys fans with any real confidence. And in addition to this, the Cowboys also lost wide receiver Michael Gallup to the Las Vegas Raiders, as well as 8-time Pro Bowl offensive tackle Tyron Smith, who left for the Jets after being a second-team All-Pro last time out for Dallas. Smith is likely to be a big loss for the team as a veteran that has been on the team for 13 seasons, and one who was a real leader in the locker room for this team. The fact that he has opted to depart for New York is somewhat telling. If he is looking for one last run at the Super Bowl at 34 years old, it really says something that he is more confident in getting one with the Jets out of all places than he is in Dallas. On defense, the Cowboys also lost Dorrance Armstrong, who signed a $45 million 3-year deal with the division rival, Washington Commanders. Also departing were the likes of Jonathan Haskins and Leighton Vander Esch, the latter of whom sadly had to retire early at the age of 28 due to persistent injury issues. The Cowboys have really struggled to add big names in free agency, and it's unclear to the extent to which they really pushed the boat out in order to secure the kind of players that would have helped put this team over the top. But in talking about the Cowboys' ability to secure big money signings, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Dak Prescott is about to enter his 9th year as a Dallas Cowboy, and since his rookie year, he's been the great hope in Dallas, that he'd be the man ready to take the team back to glory, after taking over from longtime starter Tony Romo, who suffered an unfortunate injury in the preseason. Prescott's rookie year was fantastic, as he set the rookie record which stands to this day for a passer rating with 104.9, as the Cowboys went 13-3 and secured the 1 seed in the NFC. And while the Cowboys would lose a thriller to the Packers in the playoffs, many figured that the team was well poised to make a great run at glory very soon. And Prescott has absolutely shown his ability in this league at times. He's thrown for 4,000 yards on 3 different occasions and led the league in passing touchdowns just this past season with 36, as the Cowboys had yet another impressive regular season. But one of the biggest narratives around Prescott is his inability to show up in big games, and arguably his playoff record shows this quite bluntly. In his time as a Cowboy, Prescott has gone 2-5 in playoff games, which is 2 victories in wildcard games in the 2018 and 2022 seasons. He has yet to reach a division championship game with an 0-3 record in divisional round games, including games like the 19-12 loss against the Niners 2 years ago, where he had a distinctly disappointing 69.3 passer rating as the Cowboys season fizzled out at home once more. Again, he clearly is not a bad quarterback by any means, but considering the amount of money that the Cowboys are dishing out to him, it's beyond fair to say that the Cowboys fans can feel shortchanged by their franchise quarterback over the last few seasons. In 2021, Dak signed a $160 million deal for a 4-year deal, of which $126 million was guaranteed. Again, paying your franchise quarterback is just the price of doing business in the modern NFL, but in many ways this has been a milestone round the neck of the Cowboys in recent seasons. His cap hit this year is just over $55 million, which seriously damages the team's ability to splash out big money free agents. And very soon, this could come to head when trying to extend the contract of CeeDee Lamb. Lamb is the Cowboys' best receiver by a mile, and one of the very best players in the league, having recorded 1,749 yards through the air last year behind only Tyreek Hill in the entire NFL. Lamb is on his 5th-year option and is earning just short of $18 million this season, a significant jump on his $4.4 million hit in the final year of his rookie deal. Tying down Lamb for 2025 and beyond has to be a priority for the Cowboys, but it's definitely not going to be cheap. With Justin Jefferson now signing a contract extension worth $35 million a year, Lamb will no doubt be looking for a figure in that ballpark, which could create another headache for the Cowboys, especially as Dak's contract expires at the end of 2024. Moving on from Prescott has seemed unthinkable for much of the last 8 years, and it would be an absolutely huge call for Jerry Jones to make. But if the Cowboys fall short one more time, maybe that's exactly what will and maybe need to happen. The NFL salary cap shot up by around $30 million for 2024 to a new high of $255.4 million for a 53-man roster. And so far this offseason, we've seen several huge extensions handed out to good, if not elite quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, and most notably, Jared Goff. Goff's deal works out at $53 million a year, and any Prescott extension is likely to be for the same amount, if not more. Just this past few months, ESPN has reported that the Cowboys are, quote, all in on securing the Dak extension, although we have heard that phrase before. Considering how good Dak Prescott was during the regular season, he had the best year of his career so far in terms of passer rating. Tying down Prescott would seem like the logical move, but again, it could come at an outrageous price, one of which already seems to be hindering any movement for elite players at skill positions. Prescott's defenders and supporters will also point to the fact that he led the league's highest scoring offense last year, which averaged just shy of 30 points a game. However, his critics will fairly point out how many of those points came against the whipping boys of the league, putting up over 38 points against the Giants twice, and the Commanders twice, and the Patriots, while only putting up just 10 points against San Francisco and Buffalo. All of this, media narratives, contracts expiring, a lack of signings, built up to 2024 being a huge year in the long-term future of this franchise, a significant make-or-break year. McCarthy in particular has a huge task ahead of him to convince Cowboys fans and local media in Dallas that he is the man for the job. But despite a lack of movement in free agency and a draft class that the jury is still out on, McCarthy absolutely has pieces to work with on this team. After all, they were the 2 seed in the NFC last year, and that was for a reason. They looked well placed to win the NFC East again, and with the Giants and Commanders still in rebuilding mode, on how the Eagles imploded down the stretch late last season. This team absolutely still has talent on it, with 8 All-Pros returning to the roster in 2024, including one of the league's very best defensive players in Micah Parsons, as well as record-breaking Deron Bland, who scored 5 interception returns last year, an all-time NFL record. Having said all of this, it's still difficult for any Cowboys fan to be truly convinced that next season will be any different to last, with no real signs of improvement on last year's roster. And the Cowboys have a tough opening stretch, facing the Browns, Ravens, Steelers, Lions, and 49ers in the first 7 games. 5 teams who made last year's playoffs. As much as this year feels like a win or bust type season for the franchise, we might have an idea by the end of October whether or not this season is going to fizzle out, and if Jerry Jones and company will have to blow it up at the end of the year. Jones has been surprisingly patient with McCarthy, but a poor 2024, and there's almost no doubt that he'll be shown the door. The same is probably true for Prescott, who at the time of writing this has yet to sign a new extension with the team. All in all, it promises to be a fascinating year in Dallas, as it is usually with America's team. And if things do go south in 2024, it will really be the end of an era, leading to Jerry and his team possibly looking for a new head coach and new quarterback at the offseason next year. But what do you think? Are the Cowboys going to be real contenders to lift up the Lombardi Trophy in February? Should the Cowboys really push the boat out to re-sign Dak this offseason? And will this might be Mike McCarthy's last season in Dallas, or even as an NFL head coach? Let us know in the comments.